The massive transport ship groaned as it docked with the Galactic Military Academy. Inside the cargo bay, dozens of young beings from across the galaxy shifted nervously on their feet, claws, or whatever they used to stand. The air recyclers worked overtime to manage the mix of oxygen, methane, and other gases needed to keep everyone breathing. Captain Davis pressed his face against the observation window, watching the controlled chaos below. 20 years of running this academy had taught him to spot trouble early. His eyes swept over the usual suspects. The towering Crothery with their thick gray scales and razor-sharp claws, each one standing nearly 8 feet tall. Their home world was a low-gravity desert where strength meant everything. Next to them, the Vexians looked like walking crystal sculptures, their transparent bodies catching and reflecting the bay's harsh lighting. Beautiful, but deadly in their own way. The plant-like Sylvani swayed gently near the back, their bark-like skin and leafy appendages making them look more like walking trees and soldiers. Davis had learned not to underestimate them either. Those innocent-looking branches could move faster than a human eye could follow. But his attention kept drifting to one particular recruit who didn't seem to fit anywhere. Kate Blake stood in the middle of the crowd, looking almost bored. She was average height for a human, maybe 5'6", with light brown hair tied back in a messy ponytail. Her clothes were simple, dark pants and a plain gray shirt that had seen better days. Everything about her screamed ordinary. Davis knew better. The file on his desk marked her as coming from Earth, and that single word changed everything. Earth wasn't just another planet in the registry. It was classified as a classic Psi Deathworld, the highest danger rating possible. Most species considered it completely uninhabitable. The fact that humans not only lived there but thrived was something that still puzzled galactic scientists. The transport bay doors hissed open, and the recruits began moving forward in a shuffling line. Kate walked with an easy stride that looked almost lazy compared to the careful, measured steps of the others. She wasn't trying to look tough or intimidating like some of the Crothery youth. She wasn't examining every shadow for threats like the nervous Vexians. She just walked, hands loose at her sides, eyes taking in everything with mild curiosity. What the other recruits didn't know was that Kate had grown up dodging acid rain that could melt through metal. She'd learned to hunt creatures that could bite through steel armor before she'd learned to drive. The gravity on her homeworld was nearly twice what most species considered survivable. Every day on Earth was a fight just to stay alive. As they entered the Academy's main corridor, Kate felt the artificial gravity field wash over her. The galactic standard was set to accommodate most species, roughly 60% of Earth's crushing pull. To her, it felt like someone had filled her boots with helium. Each step wanted to launch her toward the ceiling. She had to concentrate just to walk normally. The climate controls hummed quietly, maintaining what the Academy called moderate survival conditions. The temperature was a steady 72 degrees, with carefully balanced humidity and air pressure. For most species, this represented the extreme edge of what they could handle for extended periods. For Kate, it felt like a perfect spring morning back home. She almost expected to smell flowers. A group of young Crothery near her were already sweating, their scales glistening under the corridor lights. One of them, a particularly large specimen with intricate markings on his forehead, kept flexing his claws nervously. Kate had read about their species during the long journey here. They came from a desert world with thin atmosphere and low gravity. This environment was probably pushing their limits already. The corridor opened into a massive hall that could have held a small city. Hundreds of recruits from previous transports were already gathered, creating a rainbow of different shapes, sizes, and colors. Some floated in specialized atmosphere bubbles. Others wore environmental suits or breathing apparatus. The diversity was staggering. At the front of the hall stood a human in a military uniform that had seen decades of use. His gray hair was cut short, and his weathered face carried scars from conflicts across the galaxy. When he spoke, his voice carried easily to the crowd without any need for amplification. "Welcome to your new hell," Instructor Matthews announced, his tone matter-of-fact rather than threatening. "For the next 6 months, this academy will test everything you think you know about yourselves. Some of you will wash out in the first week. Others will make it to graduation and still not be ready for what's waiting out there among the stars." Kate found herself smiling slightly. Hell? This place felt more like a vacation resort compared to home. But she kept that thought to herself as Matthews continued his speech about honor, duty, and the challenges ahead. 3 weeks had passed since Kate Blake arrived at the Galactic Military Academy, and she had done her best to blend into the background. Every morning brought the same routine, physical conditioning, weapons training, tactical simulations, and combat drills. While other recruits struggled with the basic exercises, Kate found herself holding back constantly, trying not to stand out. The conditioning runs were the worst part of hiding her abilities. The track circled the Academy's main compound, a 2-mile loop that most species consider brutally challenging. Kate watched as Crothry warriors gasped for breath after the first lap, their thick scales heaving as they fought to pull oxygen from air that felt thin to them. The crystal-like Vexians moved in slow, measured steps, their bodies not built for sustained movement. Even the plant-like Sylvani, despite their natural endurance, struggled with the pace. Kate had to force herself to run slower, matching the speed of the middle group. Her breathing stayed steady, while others panted around her. Back on Earth, she used to run 15 miles through mountain terrain just to reach the nearest trading post. This felt like a gentle jog through a park. During weapons training, she pretended to struggle with the standard-issue plasma rifles. The instructors praised her quick improvement when she finally allowed herself to hit the target center consistently. What they didn't know was that she'd been shooting since age 8, when her father taught her to take down the massive steel-hide bears that roamed near their settlement. Compared to those moving targets, the stationary training dummies might as well have been painted with bullseyes. The hand-to-hand combat sessions were where Kate really had to act. She let other recruits throw her around, pretending their strength actually affected her. When a young Crothry managed to pin her down during a grappling exercise, she acted winded and defeated, even though she could have broken free without effort. The instructor noted her gradual improvement in his reports. But the other recruits were starting to notice things. During meal times, conversations would die down when she approached. She'd catch them staring at her across the dining hall, whispering among themselves in their various languages. The translation devices they all wore made it easy to understand what they were saying. "Have you seen how she eats that protein paste?" One Vexian asked a companion. "She acts like it tastes good. That stuff is barely edible." "I heard Deathworlders have altered taste buds," another replied. "They have to eat toxic substances just to survive on their home planets." A group of Sylvani discussed her during evening study sessions. "She never seems tired after the conditioning runs. Even our best athletes are exhausted by the end." "Maybe the stories about Deathworld endurance are true," one suggested, "though she looked so fragile." The whispers followed her everywhere. Some recruits seemed fascinated. Others appeared nervous around her. A few looked at her with outright suspicion, as if she might explode without warning. Kate tried to ignore it all, focusing on getting through each day without revealing just how easy everything was for her. The breaking point came during a standard combat demonstration. Instructor Matthews was showing the class proper defensive stances, using volunteers to demonstrate techniques. The recruits formed a loose circle around the practice area, watching as he explained how to counter different types of attacks. Kate stood toward the back of the group, trying to stay invisible as usual. She was focused on the instructor's movements when she felt someone step up directly behind her. The presence was large and intimidating, casting a shadow over her smaller frame. Thane Vextal was everything a Crothry warrior was supposed to be. Standing nearly 9 feet tall, his gray scales were polished with shine that reflected the training room's lights. Intricate blue markings covered his forehead and arms, marking him as nobility from one of the warrior clans. His claws were filed to razor points, and his muscles bulged beneath his scaled hide. On his homeworld, he would have been considered a prime specimen of Crothry's strength and breeding. More importantly, Thane was getting frustrated. 3 weeks of training had shown him that he wasn't the dominant force he'd expected to be. The artificial gravity here was heavier than what he was used to, making every movement feel sluggish. The air was too thick and humid for his desert-adapted lungs. Even worse, some of the other species were proving to be serious competition. But there was one recruit who bothered him more than any other, the small human female, who never seemed to struggle with anything. She was obviously hiding her true abilities, and Thane wanted to know what she was really capable of. If the stories about Deathworlders were true, she might be the strongest being in their entire class. The thought that this tiny creature might be more powerful than him, a Crothry noble, was intolerable. As Instructor Matthews continued his demonstration, Thane quietly positioned himself directly behind Kate. His massive frame blocked the light, and several nearby recruits noticed, stepping away to give him space. Kate felt a change in the air around her, but kept her eyes focused forward, hoping he would move on. Instead, Thane leaned down close to her ear and spoke in a low rumble that only she could hear. "Let's see how strong you really are, little Deathworlder." The moment Thane's clawed hand made contact with Kate's shoulder, something shifted in the air of the training hall. What he intended as a show of dominance was about to become a lesson in why Earth was classified as the most dangerous inhabited world in known space. Kate felt the pressure of his grip, fingers designed to crush stone on his low-gravity homeworld pressing into her shoulder blade. To Thane, this represented the peak of Crothry's strength, enough force to make most species cry out in pain or drop to their knees. To Kate, it felt like someone giving her a firm handshake, maybe even a gentle one. But it wasn't the physical pressure that triggered her response. It was the intent behind it. 18 years of living on Earth had taught her to read danger in ways that other species couldn't imagine. Every human child learned to recognize the difference between playful roughhousing and genuine threat. The tone in Thane's voice, the way he positioned himself to block her escape routes, the deliberate invasion of her personal space, all of it screamed predator behavior. On Earth, hesitation meant death. There was no time to think, no moment to consider diplomatic solutions when a steel-hide bear was charging at you, or when acid storms gave you seconds to find shelter. Evolution had hardwired humans for instant response to threats, and right now, every instinct Kate possessed was screaming that she was being attacked. Her body moved before her conscious mind could even process what was happening. This wasn't a calculated decision or a planned response. It was pure survival programming, refined by countless generations of ancestors who had lived through humanity's climb from prey species to apex predator. Kate's left hand shot up and grabbed Thane's extended wrist, her fingers wrapping around scales that felt as thick as leather armor. To her, they might as well have been paper. Her right hand found his elbow, establishing the grip pattern that her father had drilled into her since childhood. Every human settlement taught these moves as basic survival skills, the same way other species taught their young to find water or identify edible plants. She pivoted on her left foot, her hip rotating with the smooth precision of someone who had practiced this movement thousands of times. Not in training halls or martial arts classes, but in real survival situations where failure meant becoming something's dinner. The motion was so fluid it looked almost like dancing. Thane, despite his impressive size and strength, found himself completely helpless. His own forward momentum became his enemy as Kate redirected his energy with mechanical precision. The laws of physics took over, and his massive frame began to move through the air in a perfect arc. For a brief moment, the 9-foot Crothry warrior was completely airborne. His expression shifted from arrogant confidence to shocked confusion as he realized he was no longer in control of his own body. The training hall's artificial gravity, already heavier than what his species was adapted for, grabbed hold of his dense frame and pulled him downward with relentless force. The impact came like a thunderclap that echoed through the entire academy wing. Thane's body hit the reinforced training mat with devastating force, a mat designed to absorb impacts from species far stronger than galactic average. The synthetic material compressed under the impact, but it wasn't enough to absorb the energy of a 250-pound warrior moving at high velocity. Cracks spider-webbed outward from the impact point, racing to the supposedly unbreakable flooring underneath. The Academy's engineers had designed these floors to handle weapons testing and heavy equipment drops. Seeing them fracture from a simple training accident sent shockwaves through the watching crowd. The sound was followed by complete, absolute silence. Every conversation stopped mid-sentence. The quiet hum of the air recycling systems suddenly seemed as loud as starship engines. Even the instructor's voice trailed off as he turned to see what had caused the disruption. Kate straightened up and smoothed down her uniform shirt, her breathing completely steady. She looked down at Thane's motionless form with the same expression someone might use when observing an interesting cloud formation. There was no anger in her face, no satisfaction, no concern, just mild irritation at being interrupted. "You shouldn't grab people without permission," she said in a conversational tone, as if she were pointing out that someone had dropped their meal tray. Her voice carried clearly to the silent hall, reaching every pair of ears, audio sensors, and whatever other hearing apparatus the various species possessed. Thane lay in the center of the cracked flooring, his chest rising and falling in shallow, pain breaths. The impact had fractured several ribs, dislocated his left shoulder, and given him a concussion that left him seeing double. His pride, built up over years of being the strongest member of his clan, lay in pieces around him like the broken floor tiles. The other recruits stared in complete shock. They had just watched a human female who barely came up to Thane's chest launch him through the air like he was made of foam packaging. The casual way she had done, it was almost more terrifying than the throw itself. She hadn't even looked like she was trying. Instructor Matthew stood frozen, his lesson forgotten, as he tried to process what had just happened in his classroom. The medical team arrived within 30 seconds, their equipment humming and beeping as they rushed toward Thane's motionless form. Dr. Zelith, the Academy's chief medical officer, was a Vexian whose crystal-like body could process medical data faster than most computers. Her transparent limbs moved with practiced efficiency as she ran scanners over the fallen Crothry warrior. Multiple rib fractures, dislocated shoulder, severe concussion, and possible internal bleeding. She announced to her team, "Prepare the trauma unit for immediate surgery." As they loaded Thane onto a floating stretcher, his groans echoing to the training hall, all eyes turned to Kate. She stood exactly where she'd been before the incident, hands clasped behind her back, watching the medical procedure with curious interest. Her breathing was steady, her posture relaxed, and her expression showed nothing more than mild concern for someone who'd gotten hurt during training. The other recruits formed a wide circle around her, as if she might explode without warning. A group of young Sylvani pressed themselves against the far wall, their bark-like skin rustling with nervous energy. The remaining Crothry in the class looked at their fallen comrade, then at Kate, then back at their comrade, their scaled faces showing a mixture of fear and disbelief. Instructor Matthews pushed through the crowd, his weathered face showing an expression that Kate couldn't quite read. He'd been training alien recruits for over 2 decades, but this was the first time he'd worked with someone from his own species. The reports about Deathworld capabilities had always seemed exaggerated to him. Now he was beginning to understand they might have been understatements. "Blake," he said, stopping a few feet away from her. His voice was carefully controlled, the tone he used when dealing with potentially dangerous situations. "I need you to be completely honest with me. Did you just throw Thane using your full strength?" Kate tilted her head, looking genuinely puzzled by the question. "Full strength, sir?" She glanced over at the medical team, loading Thane into their transport unit. That was barely a light toss. Back home, we teach that exact move to 10-year-olds when they're learning to deal with pack hunters. The instructor's eyes widened slightly, but Kate continued, warming to the subject. "Actually, my little brother Tommy learned it when he was 8. He had to use it on a razor wolf that got into our compound last spring. Of course, the wolf was a lot bigger than him, so he had to put some real effort into the throw. Sent that thing flying clear over our fence and into the acid marsh." Matthews felt his mouth go dry. "Your 8-year-old brother threw a wolf?" "Well, sure," Kate said, as if explaining something obvious. "Razor wolves hunt in packs of 6 to 10. If you don't deal with the first one fast and hard, the others will surround you. Tommy did good. Got the alpha airborne and the rest of the pack backed off. Dad was proud of him." Around them, the alien recruits were backing away even further. The translation devices they wore were working overtime, and the implications of Kate's casual words were sinking in. Children on Earth regularly fought off creatures that could kill trained galactic marines. A young Vexian named CRYSDH spoke up, her voice trembling. "You're saying that what you just did to Thane, your species considers that a children's move?" Kate nodded enthusiastically. "Oh, yeah, it's basic stuff. We start learning it around age 6, along with how to make shelter, find clean water, and avoid the really dangerous predators. By the time you're 12, you're expected to handle most threats on your own." Dr. Zealata's voice crackled over the intercom system. Instructor Matthews, I need to speak with you immediately about the patient's injuries. These trauma patterns are unusual. Matthews activated his communicator. What's the situation, Doctor? The force required to cause these injuries would exceed anything our heavy world specialists could generate, came the reply. I'm reading impact stress equivalent to a small vehicle collision. How exactly did this happen? Every eye in the training hall turned back to Kate, who was still standing there looking confused by all the attention. Matthews realized he was looking at the living embodiment of humanity's reputation across the galaxy. The stories weren't propaganda or exaggeration. If anything, they had been toned down to avoid causing panic. Word began spreading through the academy faster than a plasma fire. Recruits called friends and other training groups. Instructors contacted their superiors. Academy staff shared hushed conversations in corridors. Within an hour, every being in the facility knew that the quiet human girl had casually launched a Crothry warrior across the room and considered a gentle restraint. The mess hall that evening was unusually quiet. Kate sat at her usual table, eating her regulation protein paste and vegetables with apparent enjoyment. Other recruits watched from a distance, whispering among themselves in a dozen different languages. The translation grid couldn't keep up with all the conversations happening simultaneously. Did you see how far he flew? The floor actually cracked beneath him. She didn't even look like she was trying. If that's what they consider gentle, what happens when they get serious? In the Academy's administrative center, Kate's file was being updated in real time. Her physical capabilities assessment, previously marked as estimated and unconfirmed, was now being rewritten with hard data. The danger rating assigned to human recruits was quietly upgraded from moderate caution to extreme caution advised. Captain Davis stared at his computer screen, reading the incident report for the third time. In his 20 years of running the Academy, he'd never seen anything like this. The small human girl who'd seemed so ordinary 3 weeks ago had just demonstrated capabilities that redefined everything they thought they knew about her species. He made a note in her file. Subject demonstrates superhuman capabilities considered standard for Deathworld natives. Recommend immediate review of all human recruitment protocols. 2 weeks after the training hall incident, Kate Blake was getting used to strange looks that followed her everywhere. The Academy's dining hall had become a study in careful social dynamics, with most alien recruits maintaining a respectful distance while still trying to observe her every move. She didn't mind the space. Growing up on Earth had taught her to value quiet moments when they came. She was halfway through her evening meal when a shadow fell across her table. Looking up, she saw Thane Vextal approaching slowly, moving with the careful precision of someone still recovering from serious injuries. His left arm remained in a support sling, and she could see the slight whence he tried to hide with each step. The proud bearing that had defined him during their first weeks was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like humility. "Mind if I sit?" he asked, his voice lacking the arrogant edge she remembered. Kate gestured to the empty chair across from her. "Sure, go ahead." Thane lowered himself carefully into the seat, taking extra time to position his injured arm. For a moment, they sat in uncomfortable silence while Kate continued eating her protein paste and synthetic vegetables. The meal was designed to provide optimal nutrition for a wide variety of species, which meant it tasted like cardboard to most of them. Kate actually enjoyed it. The bland, efficient nutrition reminded her of the emergency rations her family stockpiled during Earth's storm seasons. "I owe you an apology, Blake," Thane finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "What I did in the training hall was completely inappropriate. I violated Academy protocols, and more importantly, I disrespected you as a fellow cadet." Kate looked up from her meal, studying his face. The blue markings that marked his noble status seemed faded somehow, and his eyes held none of their former arrogance. "Apology accepted," she said simply. "There's more," Thane continued, leaning forward slightly. "I also owe you my thanks." This got Kate's attention. She set down her eating utensil and gave him her full focus. "Thanks for what exactly?" "For holding back," he replied, meeting her eyes for the first time since sitting down. Instructor Matthews showed me some combat footage from Earth after I got out of the medical bay. Training videos, survival documentaries, even some recordings from your planetary defense forces. I finally understand what you could have done to me. Kate frowned, genuinely confused. I'm not sure what you mean. Thane activated a small holographic projector on the table, displaying a video clip that made several nearby cadets stop eating to stare. The footage showed human soldiers during a border conflict, moving with fluid grace as they dismantled enemy positions with their bare hands. One particular scene showed a human female, roughly Kate's size, lifting a damaged combat vehicle to free trap civilians underneath. This is what your species calls normal military capability, Thane explained. The medical team ran calculations on the force needed to throw me that distance. By Crothery's standards, it should have required our strongest warriors using specialized equipment. You did it as casually as picking up a meal tray. Kate watched the footage with interest, recognizing some of the techniques from her childhood training. That's pretty standard stuff, she admitted, though that lift looks like it was done under combat stress, so she was probably running on adrenaline. Combat stress? Thane's eyes widened. Blake, that woman lifted 3 tons of metal. Our heavy equipment can't match that. Well, sure, Kate said, as if explaining something obvious. Emergency situations bring out the best in people. Back home, my neighbor Mrs. Patterson lifted a whole tree off her husband when it fell on him during a storm. Granted, it was only a small tree, maybe 2 tons, but she was in her 60s. Thane stared at her in disbelief. Around them, other cadets had stopped pretending not to listen and were openly eavesdropping on their conversation. The thought that elderly humans regularly performed feats that exceeded their military capabilities was almost too much to process. The point is, Thane continued, his voice shaking slightly, I realize now that you could have killed me without even trying. Hell, you could have torn me apart with your bare hands. But you didn't. You used exactly enough force to stop me and no more. Kate considered this for a moment, tilting her head thoughtfully. The thought never crossed my mind, honestly. You were just being stupid and inappropriate, not actually threatening. Back home, we learned the difference early. Save the real violence for things that are actually trying to kill you. Over the following days, something remarkable began happening around the academy. Instead of avoiding Kate out of fear, recruits started approaching her with questions. It began with simple things. A Sylvani cadet asking about human endurance techniques. A Vexian wanted to understand how humans maintain focus under extreme stress. Kate found herself becoming an unofficial instructor, teaching survival methods that were childhood games on Earth but represented advanced military tactics to everyone else. She showed them how to move quietly, how to find water in hostile environments, and how to read weather patterns that might turn deadly. What amazed her was how fascinated they were by things she'd learned before her 10th birthday. During one session, she demonstrated basic climbing techniques using the Academy's training walls. While other species required specialized equipment and safety harnesses, Kate scaled a 30-foot vertical surface, using only her hands and feet, moving with the easy confidence of someone who'd learned to climb before learning to walk properly. On Earth, kids climb stuff like this to get away from ground predators, she explained to the watching crowd. Trees, cliff faces, building ruins. Anything that gets you up high where most things can't follow. A young Crothery raised his hand nervously. What kind of predators require you to climb 30 feet to escape them? Kate thought about it. Well, razor wolves can jump about 15 feet straight up, and the big cats can manage maybe 20 if they get a running start. 30 feet gives you a decent safety margin, assuming the surface you're climbing won't collapse under the extra weight when they try to follow you. The silence that followed was profound. These cadets were training to become elite galactic marines, and Kate was casually describing her childhood as more dangerous than their military combat scenarios. In his office that evening, Instructor Matthews was updating his final assessment reports. Kate's file had grown considerably over the past month, filled with incident reports, capability assessments, and recommendations from various department heads. He typed his final evaluation carefully. Recommend immediate reassignment to elite special operations units upon graduation. Human subject appears genuinely unaware of her own capabilities in galactic context. What she considers basic restraint and childhood training would be classified as superhuman ability by any other species standards. Suggests developing specialized protocols for future human recruits to prevent similar incidents. He paused, then added one final note. Subject has demonstrated exceptional teaching ability and natural leadership qualities. Other cadets show marked improvement in survival training under her informal instruction. Consider assignment to training command upon completion of active duty service. Kate Blake, the quiet girl from humanity's hellish homeworld, had found her place among the stars, not as a curiosity to be studied or a weapon to be feared, but as a teacher who could show the galaxy what it truly meant to survive against impossible odds.